Welcome to a place where stories don't just get told, they are felt. Here, the heart speaks first. Here, pain is not weakness. It is the beginning of becoming whole again. You are about to enter stories born from real love, real loss, and the kind of courage that grows in silence. These are the stories of choosing self-worth, even when love breaks. Stories where freedom costs everything but gives back a life. Stories where heartbreak shatters but also rebuilds stronger. And stories where walking away is not running, it is returning to yourself. If you have loved deeply, if you have lost quietly, if you have ever had to choose your own heart over someone you never wanted to let go, then you are in the right place. Welcome to the journey of healing through love, loss, and rebirth. The mornings used to start with a kind of quiet joy, the kind where the heart woke up before the body did. There was once a love that felt warm enough to carry through any cold season, the kind of love that made the world seem softer, safer, and full of promise. There was trust, deep and unquestioned, built over shared laughter, late night talks, and dreams whispered in half-asleep voices. That trust felt unbreakable. It felt like something that time, distance, or hardship could never touch. But love can fade quietly, long before the heart is willing to admit it. It began with small changes. Conversations grew shorter. Smiles lost their glow. The warmth that once wrapped around every moment slowly thinned until it felt like standing in a room full of memories but no presence. The distance between two bodies sleeping inches apart became wide enough to feel like oceans. The heart kept reaching, kept holding, kept believing, but sometimes holding on hurts more than letting go. There was no single moment of discovery, no dramatic confession, just the quiet truth settling into the bones, the kind that is felt before it is understood. Someone else's name lingered in conversations. Someone else's shadow moved behind the walls of a shared life. Someone else had already been allowed into the space that used to belong to just two. The betrayal was not loud, it was quiet, and somehow that made it heavier. There were nights spent sitting in silence, watching the ceiling, feeling the weight of a broken love pressing down. Tears fell without sound. The heart tried to understand where everything had gone wrong. The mind replayed moments, searching for a sign missed, a moment not handled right, a reason to stay. But love, no matter how deep, cannot repair what respect has already abandoned. There came a night where the silence felt sharp, like it could cut through skin. A voice whispered from somewhere deep inside, a voice that had been ignored for too long. If staying means losing yourself, then staying is not love. The realization was soft, not bitter. It was painful, but steady. It felt like finally opening the eyes after pretending not to see. Sleeping in the same bed felt wrong. The home looked unfamiliar, like walking through a memory instead of a life. His presence became something that didn't bring comfort anymore, only ache. And the heart understood that healing would not begin until steps were taken toward the door. The hardest part was not leaving him. The hardest part was leaving the version of life once dreamed of together. Leaving the promises, the future planned, the laughter once shared. There was a wedding dress folded gently in a box, once held with trembling hands, eyes filled with tears of joy, believing forever was real. Touching it again felt like touching a ghost. The girl who wore it had not vanished, but she had been dimmed. Letting go of that dress felt like letting go of the person who believed that love alone was enough to sustain a life. Packing belongings felt like packing pieces of a heart. But with every item placed into a box, there was a quiet reclaiming of self, a quiet reminder that losing someone else does not have to mean losing oneself. Closing the door behind, the world outside felt unfamiliar. The air was cold, but it was honest. There was space to breathe again. The first nights alone were not peaceful. They were heavy, full of trembling breath and the ache of absence. The mind tried to return to old memories, but the heart held firm. Healing is not neat. It is messy. It is raw. It is waking up and reminding the chest to rise and fall. It is choosing every day not to return to what broke you. But slowly, something shifted. The sun began to feel warm again instead of distant. The mirror began to reflect someone growing stronger, not someone who was left behind. Silence became comforting, not frightening. Loneliness softened into solitude, and the heart began to hum with quiet strength. Self-worth did not appear suddenly. It grew in small ways, in choosing peace over chaos, in choosing truth over illusion, in choosing to walk forward rather than return to what hurt. There came a day when laughter returned, not because someone else caused it, but because life did. There came a day when breathing felt natural again. There came a day when looking at the past did not sting, it simply informed. The heart did not forget the love, but it also did not want it back. Walking away was not a sign of weakness, but the deepest act of self-respect. Leaving did not mean love was not real. It meant the love for oneself became stronger than the pain of being forgotten. And that is when healing truly began. Choosing self-respect was the first step toward becoming whole again. There is a particular kind of silence that comes before a life changes, a silence that does not come from peace, but from holding pain so carefully that it no longer makes sound. That silence filled the rooms once full of laughter. It lingered in the hallways, in the shared kitchen, in the empty spaces between two hearts that once beat for each other. The home that had been built with dreams and promises now felt like a memory of something that happened a very long time ago. It was not the walls that changed, it was everything inside of them. There were days when the heart tried to stay, to hold on to what used to be. It walked through familiar rooms slowly, like touching memories with every step. The living room still held the imprint of laughter shared late at night. The kitchen still remembered cooking together, shoulders brushing, hands occasionally finding each other. The bedroom still carried the warmth of whispered promises in the dark. But memories, no matter how beautiful, do not sustain the present. They only remind of what once was. The hardest part was understanding that love could exist and still not be enough. There was love, yes, but there was also distance. There was the ache of feeling unseen while standing right next to someone who once saw every part so clearly. Words had become few, touch had become rare, the heart had become heavy with everything left unsaid. Letting go was not a single decision. It was 1,000 tiny heartbreaks. It was waking up every morning and feeling that something was wrong. It was dressing up and realizing the person whose eyes once lit up at the sight no longer looked. It was searching for a trace of affection and finding only absence. There was pain in remembering how warm things used to feel, pain in recognizing how cold they had become. The day the decision finally came, it came quietly. There was no urgency, no dramatic moment, just a simple truth settling in the chest. Staying would mean slowly disappearing, piece by piece, and there was still a life inside worth saving. Packing the past was not easy. Every item held a memory, every drawer opened a story. The home had been built with love, and leaving felt like tearing away part of the soul. There was a photograph on the shelf, 2 smiles full of innocence and hope. Hands were shaking while holding it, not because the love was gone, but because it had changed, and sometimes changed love hurts more than lost love. There were tears not of anger, but of letting go. Tears for the version of life once believed in with full faith. Tears for the dreams that would never happen now. Tears for the person who tried so hard to stay, even when staying was slowly breaking her. Stepping out of the home for the last time felt unreal. The air outside felt sharper. The ground felt unfamiliar. There was an ache that seemed to settle in the bones. Freedom did not feel free in that moment. It felt heavy. It felt like carrying too much. It felt like loss. But freedom is not gentle in the beginning. Freedom hurts because it requires leaving behind not just someone, but the version of oneself that was built around them. The nights that followed were the hardest. The bed felt too big. The silence felt louder. There were moments when the heart reached back, wanting to return, wanting to believe something could still be saved. Healing does not come in a straight line. It comes in waves, some gentle, some crashing. There were days full of doubt, days full of strength, days where the smallest memory could break everything all over again. Yet slowly, the mind began to understand something the heart could not see at first. The door that had been closed was not a final ending. It was the beginning of space, space to breathe, space to remember who she had been before love had taken up every inch. Space to rebuild a life that did not depend on being held by someone else. Little by little, mornings became easier. The mirror began to reflect someone growing, not someone lost. The world outside did not feel as cold anymore. New routines formed, new breaths came, new strength, quiet but steady, started to rise from somewhere deep inside. There came a moment, not dramatic, not loud, when walking outside one morning, the sunlight felt warm again. And in that warmth, for the first time in a long time, the heart felt light. Freedom had come at a cost. It required losing a home, a future, a love that once felt like forever. It required breaking. It required pain. It required grieving what could have been. But that cost was worth what was regained. Because in choosing to walk away, the heart was not choosing sadness. It was choosing a new beginning. There was a time when love felt endless, like a warm river flowing gently through every part of life. Days unfolded softly, full of shared moments and quiet closeness. The heart once believed that love was enough to carry two people through anything. That belief came from innocence, from trust, from the kind of devotion that gives without ever asking how much it might cost. There was comfort in the idea of forever, comfort in the presence of someone who felt like home. That comfort became a world, and in that world the heart rested, unaware of how fragile such peace could be. Then came the slow unraveling, not sudden, not loud, but gradual, like threads slipping from a woven fabric. The warmth in his voice began to fade, the shared smiles became fewer, touch grew hesitant, distant, almost unfamiliar. The heart tried to hold on, desperately trying to understand what was changing and why. There were nights spent listening to the soft hum of darkness, waiting for an explanation that never arrived. Silence took the place of conversations, and loneliness crept into the space where love once lived. Pain settled in quietly at first, soft, dull, constant, the kind of pain that sits behind the ribs, almost invisible but always present, the kind of pain that makes breathing feel heavy, and yet the heart still held on to hope, believing that maybe things would return to how they once were, believing that love could still heal what was breaking. But pain does not leave simply because someone wishes it to. It demands to be faced. There came a moment when the truth could no longer be ignored. A quiet realization that love had changed and that the heart was being slowly worn down. The person once trusted with every part of the soul no longer held it with care. The love that had once been soft had turned into something sharp. The heart had to choose, continue breaking or begin healing. Leaving was not a single step, but a series of painful breaths. Taking clothes from closets that used to hold shared choices. Taking memories off walls that once held laughter. The hands trembled with every movement. Tears blurred vision, not out of regret for love, but out of mourning for the version of life that would no longer exist. The world outside was unfamiliar, cold, overwhelming. Pain followed like a shadow, heavy and unrelenting. At first, the pain felt like destruction, like everything had been taken. There was a sense of being hollow, like something essential had been carved out and lost forever. Days passed in a haze, each breath feeling forced. Nights were long, echoing with memories. Healing felt impossible. The heart questioned if it would ever feel whole again. But pain, when allowed to be felt rather than avoided, begins to change shape. In the quiet hours, when the tears had finally stopped, something small began to emerge, a softness, a pulse, a faint, fragile strength. The heart began to realize that pain was not just breaking, pain was shaping. Every hurt, every loss, every tear was carving new understanding. The heart was learning to stand alone, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of necessity. The world outside slowly began to appear different. Sunlight felt warmer, air tasted fresher, the heart began to move without heaviness. Small joys began to return, like the sound of rain on windows, the scent of morning air, the feeling of standing still and knowing the world was still moving. Healing was not sudden, it came quietly, in moments unnoticed until later. It came through courage, the courage to keep living, to keep breathing, to keep choosing oneself even when everything felt uncertain. There were days when the past tried to pull the heart back, days when memories felt loud and unavoidable, but each time the heart remembered how far it had come. Strength was no longer something imagined, it was something earned. Pain had not destroyed, pain had transformed. It had stripped away illusions, stripped away dependence, stripped away the need for validation from someone who could no longer offer love, and in what was left, something powerful grew. The heart learned to love in a different way, gentler, deeper, but also stronger, love for the self, love for the journey, love for the ability to rise again. The person who walked away was not the same as the one who once believed love alone was enough. The person who emerged was someone who understood that love must be rooted in respect, reciprocity, and truth. Someone who knew that healing is not just recovery, it is rebirth. Pain did not leave the heart weaker. Pain rebuilt it stronger. There comes a moment in every story where the heart realizes it can no longer keep breaking and still call it love. That moment is not loud. It does not arrive with shouting or dramatic endings. It comes softly, like a whisper from somewhere deep inside, a voice that has been quiet for far too long, a voice that says, "This is hurting, this is costing too much, this is taking pieces that cannot be replaced." There was once a time when being with him felt like breathing, when his presence was a warmth that settled into the bones. Every look, every smile, every shared laugh felt like proof that life had offered something precious. The world seemed to open easily around us. The future felt solid, bright, and full of promise. There was trust, innocent, unwavering trust. There was love that felt safe, and there was a version of myself that believed this love would last forever. But forever is fragile. It didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly. The tone of his voice changed first, a softness replaced with impatience. Then came the distance, emotional before it became physical. The way he stopped listening when speaking, the way conversations felt forced, the way silence took up more space than connection. The heart noticed, of course it did, but it loved him, and love tries. Love stays, love reaches, love forgives, so I stayed, I tried, I softened. I made myself small, quiet, patient. I turned myself into something easier to love, hoping he would return to the way he once was. But shrinking oneself to fit into someone else's emptiness is not love. It is abandonment of self. There were moments when the truth flickered through, moments when I caught my own reflection and did not recognize the eyes staring back. They looked tired, diminished, like someone who had given away too much and asked for nothing in return. I told myself it was temporary, that every love has seasons, that winter eventually fades. But what do you do when winter becomes permanent? The day the realization settled fully, it was unbearably quiet. We were in the same room, but there was a distance between us that felt like miles of cold air. He spoke in a tone that made my heart flinch. Not because the words were harsh, but because there was no tenderness left in them. I felt something inside me tighten, not anger, not sadness, something deeper, a knowing. If I stayed, I would lose myself completely. Walking away did not feel like strength in that moment. It felt like breaking, like stepping out of a life that was once everything and now felt like nothing. The door closed behind me, not with finality, but with exhaustion. The world outside felt too large. The silence afterward was not peaceful. It was sharp, piercing, overwhelming. But the thing about choosing yourself is that you don't feel free at first. You feel scared. You feel alone. You feel like you left something unfinished, like maybe you failed. Nights were heavy. The bed felt empty. The mind replayed memories like old films, each one edged in softness that hurt to touch. The heart cried for what it knew, even if what it knew was slowly destroying it. Healing is not immediate. It is raw. It is slow. It demands that every wound be felt, but slowly something began to shift. One morning, the air felt different. The light through the window touched my skin in a way that didn't hurt. I made a cup of tea and realized I was breathing softly, gently, without force. My hands did not shake anymore. My heart did not ache constantly. There were still moments of sadness, but there were also moments of peace, small, quiet peace, like a soft blanket pulled over a weary body. And then came the understanding: leaving was not abandonment. Leaving was protection. Choosing myself did not mean I stopped loving him. It meant I stopped abandoning the person I was becoming. Love is not proven by how much pain one can survive. Love is proven by how gently one holds themselves when everything falls apart. With time, I learned to love again, not someone else, but the parts of me that were lost while trying to keep someone else whole. I learned to laugh again, not because someone made me happy, but because happiness grew from inside. I learned to stand alone, not as someone who was left, but as someone who finally returned to herself. Choosing myself was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of finding home in my own heart again. If this story touched something inside you, stay. There are more journeys to walk together, more hearts to heal, more voices that need to be heard. So before you go, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Not just for the story, but for yourself, because healing continues here.